How's it going? Happy Friday. Thanks for tuning in. Um, I, of course, am going to be talking about lawns tonight. And I'm really excited about this one. I hope you're excited too. It's okay if you're not, because I have so much to say about this particular topic. And I'm going to talk about it whether you like it or not. This is really interesting to me for a lot of reasons, and I think that you're going to find it interesting as well. Um, it it's just it's mind boggling. Let's talk about lawns. Here are some facts about lawns, about grass in general. Lawns occupy over 40 million acres of land, 2% of all land in the United States. And that's just the United States. Most of the facts and figures I'm going to be throwing at you are for the US, but I will try to clarify when they are not. Um, Somewhere around 23% of urban cover is dedicated to lawns, and every year, 700,000 hectares are converted to urban development in the United States, which means a whole bunch of hectares being made into lawns. I should have done the math beforehand, but it's a lot. In 1999, Americans spent $8.9 billion on lawn care inputs and equipment. 50 million households purchased lawn and garden fertilizers, and 37.4 million households purchased insect controls and chemicals. In 2016, that number had ballooned to $30 billion spent on lawn care inputs and equipment. Additionally, outside water makes up 3/4 of residential lawn use. Lawns require the equivalent of 200 gallons of drinking water per person per day. And that's not all, folks. That's just pesticides and water. Additionally, between 1993 and 2003, more than 75,000 Americans per year were injured using lawnmowers. Roughly 7 million birds die because of the use of lawn care pesticides, and the EPA estimates that in the process of refueling their lawnmowers and other garden equipment, Americans spill around 17 million gallons of gasoline every summer. That is 50% more than what was spilled from the Exxon Valdez in 1989. In addition, it requires 1 to 2 inches of water a week during the dry summer months to irrigate a lawn into a state of green, beautiful perfection. As the native plant enthusiast Sarah Stein writes in Noah's Garden, Restoring the Ecology of Our Own Backyards, there is no place in the continental United States that receives that amount of precipitation between May and October. So, you may be wondering, why on earth lawns are so prevalent in the United States? Why do we maintain these thirsty, finicky, non-native, difficult grasses and plants? And well, I'm so glad that you asked, because it is quite a story. And it begins with turf grass. Now, the grass that you see in the United States, the lawn grass that you see on golf courses and in the suburbs, is usually something like Kentucky bluegrass or some other kind of low, short grass that is native generally not to the United States, but to Europe or the Middle East. The first grasses, the grasses that are native to the United States, are things like broom straw, wild rye, marsh grass, and they're generally lower nutritional value than the grasses of Northwest Europe. The first colonists who came here, they did not find any pasture grasses, not the kinds that were familiar to them, and there were none really native to New England. However, European livestock, cattle and pigs, are not particularly picky, and they ate all of this grass and ultimately destroyed it or displaced it. And the grass that had evolved in tandem with livestock or larger grazing livestock, horses and cows and whatnot, replaced it. Kentucky bluegrass specifically probably came here in the early 1600s from French missionaries and spread to Kentucky through the waterways. It's unclear which grasses came here intentionally or which were carried by unwitting colonists, but most of the grasses that you recognize or see used in lawns, golf courses, parks are not native to the United States. Bluegrass itself is one of the top pasture grasses in the United States and far and away the most desirable species of grass for lawns. So when we're talking about the grass, when we're talking about lawns, we're talking about a plant that comes from Europe, from northern Asia or northwestern Asia, and was brought here and is not indigenous to the United States. And we, the United States, or people in general, got the idea for, or got the inspiration for lawns from England, largely. But the whole idea of sort of a manicured, open grassland area goes back a long way. The Middle English word laund refers to a glade, maybe an opening in the woods, but later came to refer to artificial stretches of land that resembled those glades. Some of the earliest lawns were places like grasslands around medieval castles in France and Britain, which were kept clear of trees so that guards could see approaching visitors, potentially hostile ones. It was also a word that was sometimes used to refer to village commons, a meadows that was shared or held in common by the village so that people could graze their sheep and cattle. I have a whole talk on the commons you should listen to. It's very good. I get angry, but I can't go into too much detail on that right now. But sometime in the 16th, 17th century, aristocracy started keeping lawns, as we would come to understand them. Sometimes these were shorn naturally by sheep or other livestock, but as time progressed, it required a team of landscapers or servants to scythe the grass and keep it nice and trim and respectable. In the 18th century, this really took off with a whole new generation of English landscape architects, most notably Lancelot Brown, who was born in 1715 and is more commonly known as Capability Brown because he would tell people, his clients, that their property had capability for improvement. He designed over 170 parks, like this one that you see in front of you, and was known as England's greatest gardener. Around the same time, in the late 18th century, the Shaker community in the United States began the first industrial production of high-quality grass, and a number of seed companies and nurseries were founded in Philadelphia, sort of all coming together at the same time. Additionally, Jefferson, Thomas Jefferson, is credited with creating the first lawn in America at his estate in Monticello, and Washington also had one at Mount Vernon. Now, at this time, it was still very much an aristocratic pursuit. It was something that required a great deal of time and maintenance and money, and it was a sign of upper-class refinement. But it was something that people aspired to, and if you were rich enough, like Washington and Jefferson, you got yourself a lawn. But starting in the mid-19th century, things started to open up for people as a whole. A whole new landscape aesthetic emerged. The first lawn mower device was developed in 1830, though it didn't catch on fully until the middle of the 19th century. But in 1870, Frank Scott wrote that a smooth, closely shaven surface of grass is by far the most essential element of beauty on the grounds of a suburban home. In his book, The Art of Beautifying Suburban Home Grounds, written in 1870. Around this same time, the first lawnmower patents were issued, 1868, and the lawn sprinkler was patented in 1871. Now, these were still luxury items. Most people did not have the space or the funds to maintain a lawn. But again, it was becoming more and more accessible to ordinary people, and it was a signifier of wealth. And in the 19th century as well, the landscape architect Frederick Law Olmsted began creating parks, much like Lancelot Capability Brown did. He planned New York City's Central Park, as well as parks in Boston, Montreal, and elsewhere. And he was responsible largely for popularizing meadows, grasslands, and public parks, but also helped design suburbs in which every residential home sported a lawn. He also is credited with starting the first full-time landscape architecture firm in America in 1883. Still, lawns are hard to maintain. They're expensive, they require a lot of water, and they don't catch on fully, even though suburban development is starting to pick up in the United States until the post-war period. And this is when things really, really get out of hand. Starting in 1947, here's another Ransom's motor lawnmower advertisement. Starting in 1947, the building firm Levitt and Sons, which was headed by Abraham Levitt and his, you guessed it, two sons, William and Alfred built 4 planned communities named Levittown in New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Puerto Rico. The Levittown in New York was built on Long Island, and it was the first. You may have heard of these Levittowns. In fact, a great deal of horrible U.S. history can be laid at the feet of the Levittown. But I am going to have to talk about the suburbs in greater detail at a later date, and but just know that the Levittowns have a lot to do with it. The Levitts mass-produced housing in the same way that sort of Ford produced cars. They were able to put up houses and create new subdevelopments in a way that was extremely cost efficient and attractive and reproducible. And this is largely why we have the suburbs that we have and why they look the way that they do. But they also insisted on producing with their houses a landscape to go with it, lawns specifically. And grass was the center of the new landscape paradigm. Abraham Levitt was an avid gardener, and he really wanted to make these Levittowns into garden communities. He wrote that no single feature of a suburban residential community contributes as much to the charm and beauty of an individual home and the locality as well-kept lawns. Residents were first expected to comply with a lengthy list of rules and regulations regarding the upkeep of their homes and the use of their property. 2 of these rules included a prohibition on hanging laundry out to dry on Sunday and also on not allowing homeowners to fence off their yards. As an aside, I should mention that Levitt and Sons would not sell homes to African Americans. Levitt did not consider himself a racist and considered housing and racial relations to be entirely separate matters. How weird. However, the Federal Housing Administration conditioned essential financing for this and other homes on sales to those of the Caucasian race. And this was stipulated in housing rent and sales agreements and deed covenants. So Levittowns were exclusively white. Now, I want to give Levitt a little bit of credit here. He did impose lawn rules on the Levitt-towners, but he was not, incredibly dogmatic on this. He had nothing against the little crabgrass and felt that clover was, quote, just as nice as other grasses. He was not explicitly telling people that they had to have a perfectly manicured and flawless lawn. It was okay that it was imperfect. But things really pick up from here, folks, because in the 1950s, President Dwight Eisenhower, you see here with Arnold Palmer, began playing golf and inspired countless other Americans to set off for the links. The golfer in chief played nearly 800 rounds while in office. Not since Mary, Queen of Scots, had any head of state done so much to popularize golf for the masses. One golf promoter said that Eisenhower's devotion to golf was the greatest thing that ever happened to the game. When Eisenhower assumed office in 1953, an estimated 3.2 million Americans played golf. By 1961, that number had doubled. Actually, it does sound familiar. I wish that before I had done this, I had researched how many rounds of golf Trump played. You know what? Let's look it up. Let's see if this is on the internet. Hold on, everyone. Let's see. Forbes says that he has played, or at the time that this was written, he had 285 daytime visits, which is not the same as rounds. So I don't actually know. I don't know who played more golf, but Eisenhower played a lot of golf. And as a result of the popularity of golf and as a result of new irrigation techniques, golf courses became very green, very manicured. The Augusta National Golf Club in Atlanta, outside of Atlanta, it's somewhere around there, groomed its holes into a state of unparalleled perfection. And then, as sort of a part of all of this change, the Masters was first televised in black and white, and then 10 years later in color, further adding to the craze. Also, as a part of this, are companies like Scott's Miracle Grow Company, which you can see the headquarters of here. Beautiful, perfectly manicured. Scott's was actually founded in 1868 by Orlando M. Scott as a premium seed company for the U.S. agricultural industry. And in the early 1900s, it began to sell lawn grass seed for homeowners. And then in 1924, became the first company to ship grass seed products directly to stores. Before that, it was only available through mail. But the Scott's Miracle Grow Company and other companies like it, specifically interested in selling chemicals, including companies like Monsanto, which you may have heard of, had a vested interest in the burgeoning seed and grass and lawn care industry that grew up as suburbs exploded and changes in agricultural and chemical techniques allowed people to maintain more beautiful, more perfect, more flawlessly manicured lawns. And this, of course, involved pesticides, a great deal of pesticides, herbicides, insecticides, other chemical products designed to keep your lawn perfect. You can see here an advertisement from Scott's telling people not to eat their dandelions, to kill them with Scott's. Actually, don't know what product this is for. One of their many herbicides, pesticides, whatever. And Scott's and other companies like it will tell you that their products are safe, that they will not cause horrible birth defects or run off into the water. But in 2002, the Scott CEO admitted that we cannot assure that our products, particularly pesticide products, will not cause injury to the environment or to people under all circumstances. This is getting into non-historical territory, which I would love to talk about. I could rail against present-day lawns all night, but I'm going to try to restrain myself because there's so much more to talk about. But just know that the use of pesticides and herbicides, it's a constant state of change and negotiation, and they are sometimes banned and sometimes restricted. But the use of chemical pesticides, herbicides, other products to treat lawns has somewhat slowed since the turn of the 21st century, but all in all remains about the same. Sales are still substantial in the billions of dollars for products that are specifically for treating lawns. And there's something interesting about this. You may think that the use of chemicals or pesticides is something that's correlated with conservatism or certain red parts of the country, but actually, higher rates of chemical use have been shown to correlate to higher incomes, greater levels of education, and high degrees of environmental knowledge and concern. So you might be asking, Rob, why is it like that? How is that possible? Well, let's talk about it. Because this is the really, really interesting thing about lawns. Here's another thing about lawns. Lots of pesticides that kill all sorts of things. They're terrible. They suck. So why is it like this? Why do lawns exist? Why do we spend billions of dollars on them? Why do we dump perfectly good water on our useless, purely decorative lawns? There's somebody mowing the lawn outside right now, folks. Right now. You might also think, oh, Rob, you're down on lawns because you had to mow lawns as a kid, and that's true. I did have to mow lawns as a kid. However, I didn't really hate it. I did not hate mowing lawns. It was fine. It was a good time to get outside. My lawn was not that big, but I really like my thing with lawns. My thing with lawns sort of emerged when partially when I became a homeowner, but also because I had to start thinking about why on earth this thing exists. And as I started to do research, I was like, holy shit, this is even dumber and more wasteful than I thought. And it's even more depressing than I considered when I was growing up in the suburbs. So the traditional explanation of like why lawns are the way that they are is that from an economic perspective, right? Lawn management is sort of an economically rational behavior that is designed to maximize the economic utility of your lawn and of your home, right? If you own a home and you want that home to be as valuable as possible, you want to sell that home for the maximum amount, you are sort of obliged to maintain your lawn, right? Your lawn, whether or not it's useful, indicates value, right? And so you are sort of economically bound in a material way to this bizarre ritual of grass maintenance. But there's more to it than that. A couple of researchers that I read, Paul Robbins and Julie T. Sharp, wrote in Producing and Consuming Chemicals, The Moral Economy of the American Lawn, that it's actually threefold, right? There's economic imperatives in the lawn chemical industry, which push new innovative forms of marketing that then produce an association of community, family, and environmental health with intensive turf grass aesthetics, which in turn reflects an increasing local demand by consumers for authentic experiences of community, family, and connection to the biological world through meaningful work. So what does this mean? So yes, people do maintain their lawns because for economic reasons or because they're stunting on their neighbors or whatever, king of the hill shit. But respondents also report into surveys about this, reported an obligation to maintain their private lawns intensively, not just in defense of their neighbors' property values, but in support of positive neighborhood cohesion, participation, and holding the neighborhood together. And this is the really like nightmarish thing, right? It inverts the tragedy of the commons, right? Rather than create collective externalities in pursuit of personal gain, lawns create personal externalities in pursuit of collective gain, in theory. The contradiction, right, is resolved, right? Why do people who care about the environment use chemicals? Suddenly makes sense if you're seen as markers of collective responsibility, right? These individuals, people who work on lawns, are not doing it actually in many cases because they're personally invested or they're trying to maximize their own wealth. It is a part of a real and profoundly urgent search for meaningful work and a connection to things, people, and places outside themselves. For many people, because we have destroyed all communal space, the closest they feel to their community or to their neighbors is when they are outside working on their lawns, when they are sort of contributing to this patchwork park environment. And this is what's so gross and insidious and terrible about the American lawn, is that it has captured and subverted a good and pure desire to take care of the environment, to be part of the community, to care for others and create a space that feels safe and welcoming. And they have attached it to this completely useless patch of land, plant, which is only maintained by chemicals and pesticides and intense water use. But people have positive associations with their lawns. Of course they do. Many of you probably do. This is the worst attended lecture that I have ever given on Twitch. And I'm going to go ahead and assume that's because everybody didn't want to hear me yell at lawns. But the truth is out there, folks. You can't hide from it forever. And to be clear, what I'm saying is not, you can have your lawn. It's fine. And there's lots of ways to have a lawn that don't involve pesticides or chemicals or wasteful water use. And there's lots of, native landscaping that is starting to take hold and is more and more popular and is quite possible in lots of parts of the country. But the lawn industry itself is one of the many poisonous, insidious aspects of capitalism developed, sort of brought up because of the growth of the suburbs and the profitability thereof, that, like I said, takes and subverts good impulses and good desires from people who want to have a safe and welcoming community, and sort of binds them to systems of exploitation and waste and corruption. So that's the lawn, everybody. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for bearing with me while I talk about grass and lawn maintenance and the suburbs. I will go back to talking about other things next month, but I wanted to talk about this lawn stuff for a long time. I'm probably not done. I want to do a talk about the suburbs in general at some point, but that's a really big topic. So I wanted to talk about lawns. So when you're out in the spring, summer, as I know all of you are, maintaining your grass, don't touch grass, rip it up. Rip it up and put in something else. Native grasses. I don't care. Leave it dirty. Make a mud pit. Piss off your neighbors. You'll feel good. I promise. Good night, everyone. Stay healthy. Stay safe.